to become X plus ions. I'm sorry, there's supposed to be a space between the plus and the ion there. Okay. Happening. We know that oxidation is the loss of electrons. Now, let me remind you that this blue thing is a solid made out of atoms of X. So what will happen is that in this case, because as you can see here, electrons are flowing to the right, which means electrons are leaving from the blue one to the red one. How do we get those electrons? The electrons must be taken from the atoms that are making up this thing. Remember, in the previous diagram, I showed you that there are billions of atoms that are making up this thing, if not trillions. An atom of X will lose an electron. Let's say here's X here as an atom. It loses an electron. After losing an electron, we know oxidation is the loss of electron. After losing an electron, it becomes X plus. Okay? After becoming X plus, it cannot stay on the metal that is called the anode. It must go join the solution which already has other X plus. Okay? That's what actually happens there. That's what we are going to talk about. And we are saying on the anode is the electrolyte where oxidation takes place. As you can see on the top right there. The anode is this one, is the blue one. How does the oxidation take place? Now, bullet number 2, we are saying atoms in the X metal. The X metal is our anode, are oxidized to become X plus ions. I'm sorry, there's supposed to be a space between the plus and the ion there. Okay, X plus ions. This is what we call the oxidation. Is not, that's not a V, that's actually an X. This is called the oxidation half reaction. Okay, because it happens on half of the cell, it happens on the left hand side. There's another cell on the right hand side called the reduction cell. So the atoms, I'm going to keep on emphasizing this one because it's the most important thing. The atoms inside the metal, that blue metal there, I'm going to remove this as well, just to, this thing is not too messy now. Okay, the atoms of the electrode on the left hand side, which is the anode, will lose electrons. We know every time an atom loses electrons, it becomes positively charged. There is the atom X. It loses electrons to an electron to become X plus. Yes, we balance the oxidation half reaction by putting a charge of an electron so that we can have 0 charge on the left and 0 charge on the right as well. What then happens to the ion X plus? We've just explained that the X plus can no longer stay inside the blue, inside the blue area, which is the anode. It can't stay there because the blue anode is made up of X atoms. This thing changes. It's no longer X atom. It becomes an X plus ion. And where do we find other X plus ions? We find them here on the electrolyte. So we then say the ions, X plus ions will then, the X plus ions will then escape the X metal, which is the anode, into the electrolyte. That's what happened to this X. You remember this X here lost an electron and became X plus. After becoming X plus, it does not stay inside the blue anode there. It leaves and go to the solution because the solution has other X ions there. Then what happens to the electrons? The blue anode, which is the blue electrode there, is now going to be negatively charged because it has now, that's why we have that negative there, Why is it becoming negatively charged? It's because there are surplus electrons. Where are we getting those electrons? The X atoms, these X atoms would have lost the electrons and left them here. And then after leaving, remember X plus goes to the solution, which is called an electrolyte. Those electrons will then now in the next move, okay, because we are losing an atom of X. We'll get to the electrons just now. We are losing atoms. Remember, the metal, the anode is made up of atoms. When you lose those atoms, the metal becomes smaller, which is the anode becomes smaller. Hence, we say the anode will lose mass due to the X plus ions escaping escaping from the metal into the electrolyte. What happens then to the electrons? The electrons will then flow from the X metal through the external conductor. Here's our external conductor here. The wire connected to the anode, the blue anode or the blue electrode. The electrons will start flowing here and then they will go there. That's just an ammeter, a mini ammeter there to measure the flow of current. And then the electrons will come to Y. So the electrons are moving from this side and they go all the way to the external circuit and they go this side. That's what the exam guide says you must know. You must know the movement of electrons, and you must also know the movement, the direction of electrons, and you must also know the movement of ions as well. The movement of ions, I've already explained the movement of ions here. Remember, X as an ion, as an atom, loses an electron to become X plus. It becomes an ion. That ion X plus leaves the blue electrode into the solution. It goes into the solution. Then the electrons that it left here will then go up and go this side, and then they go to the red electrode. Remember, the red electrode is called the cathode. That's where reduction will take place. So electrons will flow from the anode to the cathode. Once you know which one is the anode and which one is the cathode, you know electrons will flow from the anode. Why do we get electrons from the anode? It's because oxidation takes place in the anode. Oxidation is the loss of electrons. Those lost electrons will have to leave and go through the external circuit, go to the other side where we have the cathode. Okay, now we are going to move to the second part, which is cell number 2, half cell number 2. We've now dealt with half cell number 1. Half cell number 1 is where oxidation takes place. Remember, this is redox reaction. We've dealt with the ox part. Now we're going to deal with the red part, which is reduction. Now, electrons will arrive here. The cathode is the electrode where reduction takes place. Reduction takes place on the cathode. The cathode is the red electrode. Remember, the anode is the blue one. Now, what then happens is that the Y ions, there's Y ions there, the positively charged Y ions, so you can see them. What happens to them? Remember, we've just had electrons arriving. Allow me to just use the pen and write. Let me use the blue one. We've just had a number of electrons arriving here. Where are they coming from? They are coming from this side. Remember, they are coming from the anode side.